Hello. I think this is kind of loud. I'm going to turn this down a little bit before I hurt your ears.
You're good.
Oh, am I? It feels like I'm reverberating in a weird way. Okay. My name is Georgia Court. I'm the proprietor here, and I'm not only happy to welcome you all here, but I'm happy to welcome back the Hermitage Artist Retreat. We have such a wonderful partnership with the Hermitage Artist Retreat, which is like, oh, it's the best place in this whole area. And we do wonderful events together. So I'm happy to have them back here. And you're going to actually hear the real introduction from Andy Sandberg, who is the creative director and CEO of the Hermitage. But before I hand this mic to you, Andy, I want to let you know that there will be a Hermitage alum, another one, coming for our Poetry Life event, the bookstore's Poetry Life event on February 23rd. And one event is here, and on that same day in the evening, the other event is at Florida Studio Theater, and that's Amy Nezuko Madatil. And some of you probably remember her. She was at the Hermitage. She's a percussionist. No, I'm sorry, that's Deborah. She's a poet. I'm sorry. There's another alum who figures here, and she's a percussionist. That's Deborah. But Amy is definitely a poet and a prose writer, so she will be here on February 23rd. So I hope you'll consider coming to that as well. But let me find Andy Sandberg.
Thank you.
Turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Georgia. We always love being here, so yes, we will take best place in the world, but best place downtown Sarasota, we will give to Bookstore One. So thank you all for being here. We always love coming here and bringing wonderful authors. How many first-timers to a Hermitage program? Just so I have a sense. I see a lot of familiar faces. First-timers, very exciting. We love that. So we host artists in literature, theater, film, dance, music, all disciplines, and we're very excited to have a brilliant author with us here today. More on this wonderfully talented gentleman shortly. Just a few quick announcements. If you haven't turned off your cell phones, my theater background inclines me to ask you to do so. We're going to be here about an hour together with the words and the conversation and whatever other music and ambient around us. I have to thank Georgia not only for hosting this event in this series, but also for being the sponsor of Joseph's residency. So thank you, Georgia, for all you do for us in supporting the Hermitage. I want to thank our friends at Asala for helping to promote this event as well. Yes, we love Asala, thank you. I also just want to thank all of you who are our regular supporters and friends who make what we do possible. We couldn't do it without any of you, and I want to shout out our friends at Gulf Coast Community Foundation, Jennifer Johnston here. Thank you for all you all do for us. And our wonderful trustees. We have a few current and past among us, so thank you for your leadership and support. And then we have just today announced our new series of programs for January. So we're kind of been month to month, as some of you may know if you follow our newsletters. We've had some fun adventures of rescheduling and reopening this past year. So everything's been a little flying more by the seat of our pants, but we have some great programs coming up in January. If you go to our website, you will see those announced, and a few of them are listed there on your program. So you sign up just as you did today, and we hope you'll come check us out at many other wonderful venues. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest of honor today, the gentleman you'll be hearing from. I'm not going to read his entire bio because we're going to have a chance to talk a bit, but Joseph Earl Thomas is a brilliant multi-hyphenate author who works across many disciplines. Some of you may have purchased, I saw, the books, God Bless You, Otis Spunkmeyer, or Sink, a Memoir, and we'll talk about those as well as Joseph's other work. He's currently on the faculty at Sarah Lawrence, among his many other accolades and credits. So please join me in welcoming to the wonderful chair at Bookstore One, Joseph Earl Thomas. I'm just assuming since you sat there earlier, that was the one you wanted.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you all for being here. It's wonderful.
So I want to ask just a little bit about, we'll dive right in. Tell me how you got into writing? Where did you know that you were a writer, and then when did you know it was a career?
Yeah, this is a good question. I will say very late in life by technical standards, right? The sort of like New York writing industry presupposes that anyone under the age of 30 is like ancient to start becoming a writer. It's a huge problem, which we can talk about in further detail, but I was already, when I became a writer, I had already studied biology as an undergraduate. I had been in the Army for 9 years at that time. I was a medic, and I deployed to Iraq in 2009, 2010. And I had started graduate school for medicine. So I thought that that's what I was gonna do. I wanted to do ecology, but I was tired of being poor, so I said, okay, I'll split the difference and go to graduate school and study medicine. And during that time, I was also taking courses at a local university called St. Joseph's University. I was getting an MA in English because I had gotten a kind of scholarship there to tutor people and take free classes. So I was taking creative writing, African American literature, feminist theory, sort of on and on, all the stuff that was outside of the biology stuff. And one of my professors, this woman named Aisha Lockridge, who was a mentor then and still a friend, she's like, oh, I think, you're a pretty good writer. Have you ever considered going to graduate school for that, And they pay you if you go. You don't have to pay your own tuition. And I thought to myself, she's lying, obviously. But I was the first in my family to sort of go to college at all, so I wasn't aware that, when you get a PhD, you're funded by the university. Not only do they pay your tuition, in the humanities specifically, not only do they pay your tuition, but they also pay you a stipend that was more than I was getting from work at the time. And I was sort of like, why would anybody not do that instead of what I was doing? And from there, I applied to MFA programs. I got into maybe a couple. I ended up going to Notre Dame because the package was best. And this writer named Roy Scranton, who was a mentor and friend, now ended up being my advisor. And then I went to get my PhD after that. I never really considered not writing from that point on. I had decided it was the thing.
Was there a creative outlet for you as a writer even in your younger years? Like, did you have an inkling even just for fun earlier, or did this really come later to you?
Not necessarily for writing. I used to draw, and that was a sort of big thing for me. It was more of I had more of a visual relationship to art or to thinking. The other day I was talking with Joyce about painting, and I'm like, painting is so intimidating, but I used to draw and I was really confident at that, but somehow that, painting, animating, these other things I was interested in seemed out of reach, I think because of the material costs, as well as maybe the idea that it was a version of art that was like inaccessible to me, which I now know to not be completely true, but that's how it felt. And so I went from drawing to writing because I felt I didn't need anybody's permission. I didn't need any supplies. It's easily hidden, right? I was, growing up as the eldest son in a house where I was expected to like start making money for the family at like 12 or whatever. Writing was the easiest thing to continue doing and to sort of keep under lock and key.
Well, it sounds like you had kind of a unique path insofar as you started to view writing as a career before you had sort of a known title success, if you will.
Yeah.
Was there a work of yours that you feel ended up with a certain kind of recognition that kind of let you know this is a sustainable life and career, or is it?
I was about to say, yeah, I'm still trying to find that out. No, I think, this is sort of, maybe in the 80s, it was still a sort of sustainable life and career for people who were writing for magazines and who were, published a novel here and there or something like that. But I think now it's very rare that there's any writer who can sustain themselves from the writing itself. And I think a lot of us have gone the way that poets have gone historically. Poets, a lot of whom who are also critics, especially of art, were already working in universities. They were the people who were primarily teaching creative writing, especially sort of mid-20th century until now. And now it's sort of like every other writer is also a teacher because there's no way to sort of sustain yourself in any route, especially not, journalism or like writing novels or anything like that. So I think it's still difficult, and I have thought several times about whether I would have more time to write if I just went back to medical school and didn't teach. actually, because it does take a huge amount of time.
It's interesting, a lot of people are surprised that we're year-round through summer and holidays here. I know that's offensive to many snowbirds in this room, but I think it's a lot of the artists, not just literary artists, but artists of all disciplines are also teaching for a living. And I'm curious, now you straddle a lot of different forms, and you like to challenge form, and actually I want to talk a little bit about this title we picked for the program, The Fantasy of Reality. What does that mean to you, and kind of how do you, I'll let you elaborate on that.
Yeah, I am still elaborating on that, and probably will be for a while. So it's also the title of a course that I teach, and it started off thinking about, and I'll read a little bit from Sync here. It started off from that project, which is, you know, I am really interested in the sense that we don't, I mean, people have probably heard this term world building before, with regards to fantasy, science fiction, and that kind of stuff, right? When you approach the page, you are generating or creating a world that other people are entering into. And I was interested in that sense when it comes to nonfiction writing, especially because I think that we are at a weird impasse about language in general, right? So if we are approached by a child who says something, you know, ostensibly ludicrous, we don't believe them, the things that they think are tend to be real to them in particular. I mean, a good sort of near political issue would be to say that during the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter movement, many people who were women or black folks were saying things that nobody believed to be true. So how do you sustain and sort of justify a world in which we can say basic things to each other that we can also accept as true, right? We want them to have momentum, we want them to move, we want them to do something. And I was thinking about that, especially from the perspective of sort of being a child, which is the first place where you get everyone in the world denying everything that you think or believe or feel, especially. And I became sort of obsessed with it. So part of it is about that, sort of world building or thinking about world building in nonfiction, and what are the tools from the things we call fantasy or science fiction that we can like borrow or use.
So talk to me about, you know, Sync being a memoir and kind of your point of view perspective on that and how you approached that, and, you know, was that to challenge the form or was it just kind of organically part of the process?
Yeah, it was part of the desire to challenge the form, or my kind of frustrations with the form as it exists. I don't read that much memoir anymore, especially. I really like a lot of history, theory, stuff like that. But, you know, I was thinking about, and this is related to the child thing too, so, you know, a 7 or 8 year old can walk up to you and believe whatever they want about themselves, but what's more important to the world and to what they're able to do in the world is what their parents say or believe, right? It almost doesn't matter what you say or believe when you're a kid. Sort of the family is the first version of the state in some ways. And I was thinking about, well, like, how do you get out of that trap? Like, a lot of kids, I think, withdraw. I was a kid that withdrew, and I thought to myself, well, the thing you can't take is what I think. No one can ever have that, no matter what. And even if no one ever believes anything I say about myself or experience to be true, I get to keep it, or I get to have it. And what happens if you write a book about a child that's from the perspective of everyone else around, right? Those are the people who get to decide where you're allowed to go, what you eat, where and when you sleep, whether you have any of those things, right? It's all sort of manufactured and decided by adults. And so the memoir takes place in third and second person instead of in first. And it's about how you are shaped by not your own memories, which no one believes anyway because you're a child, right? But the things that everyone else believes about you. So basically I did a bunch of interviews with family and friends, people who knew me at that time, and I sort of constructed a self based on the things that they said, the things that they remembered, especially the things that were repeated, you know? I didn't necessarily remember that I had, like, I don't know, iguanas and an alligator and a you know, guinea pig and all these other animals.
He was meant to be here.
I'm very pro alligator. But people kept saying it over and over again. Do you remember that time you did this? Do you remember that time you had that, all those weird pets, et cetera, et cetera? And so that became the shape of the book, rather than sort of me trying to, you know, arguably falsify a set of memories and project that out into the world. You know?
Do you want to give us a little sample of
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just read two little brief sections from Sync, the memoir. It takes place, I guess the thing I would say is there's sort of, it's organized in vignettes, not necessarily chapters, and some of them are about things that I would have been reading or watching or thinking about at the time. And some of them are about particular holidays or seasons that I was looking forward to, right? It all takes place in Philadelphia between the ages of 8 and 13. And summer is very, very important there. I'm lucky to escape the winter for a little bit here. So I'll read two of those sections that sort of repeat. Some summers. Some summers, Tia and Joey traced the sticky bottom of the L from Frankfurt to 69th Street on bikes, rollerblades, New Balances, or brown and silver tokens, scraping wads of gum off their bodies and burning up like horny animals darting out of a flaming zoo. Joey scraped his knee. Tia got a scar. There was no telling what they might find out on West Philly or Upper Darby, other people's neighborhoods, other kids' sanctuaries or hellscapes, a boyfriend here, a girlfriend there, a stranger far too old for either of them who had air conditioning and soft hands and cable TV. They had confidence with no direction. Bad, sad, and horrifying were subjective states of excitement, sometimes fear, but mostly hype. Who they were way across the city was anyone's guess. Tia thought it would be a good idea to light a car on fire, but Joey was too scared. Joey thought it would be a good idea to kiss Tia, but she was far past being into that. They snuck into New Orleans 8 to watch scary movie X-Men in the Cell. Up at Roosevelt Mall, the soles of their sneakers squishing all the way to the front seats like nothing was happening. They scuffled with other kids in the parking lot, throwing rocks and bottles, but never quite hitting each other. Joey wondered where they might end up if they kept going, past the northeast and Holmesburg suburbs, if they could just keep feeling good, if they could never stop moving. He pulled out a map. Boy, where the hell did you even get that, Tia said. Don't worry about it, Joey said. And he pointed to a nondescript section on the map as if he knew where they were going. Here, he said, we should go up here. All right, whatever, Tia said. And they took off again, running in every direction and growing up too fast and too slow to focus on any single thing at once. For context, Tia is my aunt by marriage who was several years older than me when I was younger. And she was sort of my mentor in sort of all things, both diabolical and not, for lack of a better word. There's another short one. Some summers feel like they'll never end. And when things are going well, even exceedingly well, let's say somebody's sister is trying to do it with you and you want to do it with her, but you're both kind of scared and you change your minds and sneak into this closed pool in the northeast and make out all night with your clothes on. And she says she loves you, but you know she doesn't really mean it, and you still don't feel like she's lying. Even then, on those nights, you can't help but think that something is gonna go really wrong, even when it doesn't. Possibility exceeds reality. But it's still warm, you have that. School is out. Some summers you'll change shape, and in the following years, relatives who used to fuck you up will say, oh, he done got so big now, and reach up and try to pat you on the head, and you'll slap their fucking hands down and stare in awe at their confusion. Embarrassment slips away. Some summers you'll sneak in and out of grown women's houses, and nary a real lover will catch you. You'll go out so far on a bike that you can't find the L no more, and it won't even matter what time you get back because you've got your own key now. You'll stay up late all night on the game, and in the morning, before anyone wakes up, you'll be gone and out the door to do it again.
Thank you for sharing that with us, and I know we're going to get to some other excerpts and different pieces. Is it fair to say this was your first major published full-length work?
Yes, it was.
And I know it's fair to say it was received with great acclaim. Did you feel like you knew you had something really special when, what was it, an editor, a publisher? Was it the New York Times? What was it that sort of, or was it just your own confidence as you were working on it?
Yeah, if only. I mean, of all things, I will say writing is the thing that I have confidence in, if nothing else. Least of all, I don't know, like swimming or public speaking or anything like that. I do have confidence in the writing. I think I got really lucky, in part because I worked at Grand Central Publishing as an editorial intern under my now editor, Maddie Caldwell. That's how we met. before that, I was sort of addicted to, and still love a lot of small press publishing, right? A lot of the sort of stranger, more challenging work that comes out of there. I'm thinking places like Tarpaulin Sky and Other Stories, Indiana University Press, which is a book that just won the first novel prize this year. I really love those presses, and some of my friends work there. And I just assumed that that's where I'd be going because the writing would be too weird. But because I knew I started to, be friendly with people at Grand Central, I thought, okay, I might as well try them too, as well as some other small presses. And Grand Central was the only place that was interested. No one else was interested in the book. And I think for lots of reasons. I mean, there's a lot of sort of what we might think of as challenging material, the discovery of sexuality as a child, all forms of abuse, both physical, sexual, etc., so on, you name it. But part of my interest in that is the sense that there are, unfortunately, many more kids than we're willing to talk about who are dealing with those experiences on a sort of everyday basis. If grown people can't even mention them in a room of intellectuals, I think that's kind of weird and not helpful. So that's part of the impetus for that. But I think all the while I sort of understood that there were going to be places that were not going to accept the work, and I sort of knew and accepted that from the beginning. But there were small magazines who did sort of have a show of support, whether it was from an essay. I'm thinking of a place like The Offing. Those kind of smaller magazines were interested from the start.
No, it's interesting because we chatted briefly beforehand about sort of like sometimes you don't know if the work might make someone cringe, right? And I know we're in an accepting, unfiltering place with the Hermitage and Bookstore One, but has anywhere surprised you where you went, they are going to hate this is not going to be for them, and twisted it on your head?
Yeah, I don't know, I think the inverse is my favorite thing. When I go somewhere and read something, or I meet someone at a reading, or someone emails me sort of out of nowhere, and it's not someone who I would be expecting to be really on board and excited about the work, but they are, right? Whether it's sort of a bookseller or someone who just reads for pleasure, or it's a writer that I look up to or something like that. Those are the moments that I'm really excited in. And I think that is why I maintain a certain kind of dedication to my own voice, no matter how challenging I might feel it will be, because I want that opportunity, right? To be surprised by and sometimes I read things and I'm surprised by them, right? Given what the material is or the form or what have you. And that's what I enjoy most, because that's the only way I think that you get out of the kind of stuckness of assuming that you know who all of your people are, and other people assuming that they know who all of their people are, is by taking that kind of risk.
And so I want to talk a second about God Bless You, Otis Spunkmeyer. Can you tell us a little bit just about the work and what drew you to write that piece?
Yeah, this one, it's funny, I started writing that before I started writing Sync. It just ended up not coming out until a little bit later. But that novel is essentially set over the course of one day. I was reading a lot of novels that were set over one day, for from the mezzanine over a couple hours, to like Haruki Murakami's one-day novel. I forget the title of it, I'll remember later. But it takes place over a single day in an emergency department, a trauma center in Philadelphia. I used to work in a trauma center for maybe like 13 years or something like that. That was like sort of my main job when I became an adult. And I was interested in a lot of things. One of them is how you continue thinking, or how you stay dedicated to thinking when you're in a state of constant crisis, which is, you could be sitting on your couch and look at the news and be in a state of constant crisis, So I'm thinking about that, and I was kind of like, what is the place where you can dramatize that? And a place that I knew well and could sort of go back and study still was a trauma center. And it's about the kind of back and forth relation that you have to a place like a trauma center, which I still miss, because you get to actually lay hands on people and recognize that someone's life may ostensibly be saved. Very unlike writing, where you sit by yourself, crying or complaining for however long until something half decent comes out. And the relationship between those two things were that while I was working at the trauma center, I would write. A trauma would come in, and we would like sort of fix the person up, and then I would go right back to writing. And then trauma would come in, go back to writing. And most of my friends actually still to this day are people who work in healthcare. They're doctors, nurses, nurse aides, etc. And so it was partly sort of an homage to them. And I think a lot about everything I write, I think, is in some way like an homage to a conversation with friends or something like that I feel like we don't have enough of. But it raises several questions about what it means to care for someone and the lengths that you're willing to go through with that regard. What it means to be able to ask questions to which there are no answers, or to consider problems to which there are no answers. And what are your sort of like responsibilities to the world, given the fact that none of us have any leisure time anymore, right? I mean, I used to work there for 12 to 16 hours a day, right? 6 or 7 days a week, right? So leisure time is sort of out of the question.
So when you're not writing in a trauma center these days, what is your process? So does it vary? I mean, you mentioned you were just working on 2 major full-length pieces, in concurrence, and I imagine other things simultaneously. What's a typical day for you? What's your schedule? What's your life? Yeah,
I mean, people who think that I respond to emails too late will not like this, but stealing time, mostly. It has a lot to do with stealing time. So I have kids, I have 4 dogs, partly because of the kids being like, you can't leave this one, it doesn't have a home, blah, 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 whatever. I have, chickens and geese in my backyard, and I am sort of the primary support person for everyone in my family. And so most of what I do is I get up before I know anyone's gonna get up. I feel like if I don't beat the sun, I've wasted the day, kind of thing. And I spend most of that time thinking and being to myself. I don't open any emails, I don't text people, I don't go on the internet or do anything like that. And then I'm really meticulous about the things that I absolutely have to do, sort of the ordering of time. I was at the dog park the other day, and this has happened more than once, where I'll get out, and the dog park's full. We go to the same dog park all the time. And the kids get out the car, they're putting the leashes on the dog, and they're saying stuff like, no, you sit and wait right here. You get the other leash and everything. And they're like walking in a line, and somebody walked by, and like, oh my God, you're like a school teacher. And sort of, because otherwise I wouldn't get anything done, right? Like I wouldn't be able to breathe. And so there is a way that I am like incredibly meticulous and sort of quick about those mandatory things, so that I can have more time to think and to write.
Does that influence kind of what project you're working on in any given day, or are you someone who's also meticulous about, okay, every day this week I am doing this long form piece, or this is poetry hour?
No, I absolutely wish. That's the place where I can't force myself to do it, so I just have to create as much time as possible. And then when I'm able to, I can. So my process is essentially, instead of staring at a screen, I just read a lot. Everything, all genres, I just sit there and read until I can't take it anymore, and I feel like I have to write. And that's why so much of what I write is in response to things that I read or conversations that I'm working on, what could turn into a longer critical book with a friend right now. And so a lot of the things that I think about are coming from conversations with her, right? And that's typically the process. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do anything.
So full disclosure, Joseph's only been here a couple of days, so he's diving right in and sharing his work. But how is that process different, or going to be different for you while you're here? What are you hoping to achieve? What are you already finding? What's surprising you?
Yeah, it honestly is a bit sort of heavenly in some ways. So for full context, I've never done a residency before at all. I've never had sort of time dedicated just to writing in my entire life. So this is the first time. Incredibly freeing so far. I owed blurbs, or there's like a couple books I'm reading for blurbs or something. I read a whole one of them already. It's only been a couple days. If I was at home, this would have been a month later, and I'd be like, I'm sorry, give me some time. And I think, to the prior thing, it's like reading that book has sprung up several other sets of questions from which, for example, 2 poems, or the ideas or the groundwork for 2 poems have sprung, and sort of more nitty-gritty revisions to something else that I was working on have sprung too. So it's been really nice.
And can you talk a little bit about what you're working on? And I know you have some work in process you may want to share too.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing, I did have a talk with my editor as well, who I told that I would be here, and she said, well, you owe me a lot of writing, so now's your chance to do it. Basically, she was sort of nice about it. Her and my agent. And that is a collection of short stories called Leviathan Beach. And the center story is essentially about these people who go to a remote island, and they are If anybody has ever seen plovers clean the mouth of a crocodile, it's essentially people are doing that work for giant leviathans who are brought back to life through de-extinction projects. I was really obsessed with de-extinction when I was studying biology too, so this is my opportunity. But that's the sort of central story there. And there are a bunch of other weird stories. They range from sort of hyper-realist to fantasy and science fiction, and it sort of changes as you go through the collection. And then some of what I will read here from is a collection of poems that are dealing with family and asking a lot of sort of broad theoretical and sort of intimate and sort of questions that relate to emotion about the concept of family and who has access to it and how and under what circumstances, so on and so forth.
Do you want to share a little bit of that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Are we good on time? I think I was gonna read, actually I'll skip that. I was gonna read a short story, but I'll actually read part of the poetry
Oh, cool.
instead, so there's more time to
He's
talk.
also a poet. As he's setting that up, I will say that I tease Joseph and other artists too that, if they have deadlines and things, they should just lie. We're an honest people at the Hermitage, but the one lie we encourage is that tell them we have bad internet. Just tell them. Tell them we're
I
disconnected.
tried that on 2 people and it was not
They
working.
didn't buy it?
No,
They were
did
like, we
not.
know other artists who've been
Yeah,
there.
yeah, exactly. They were like, yeah, that's bullshit. We did it. I'm like, okay, fine.
Try.
I guess what I would say about this, this is part of a longer poem in progress that, I think the best way to explain it is, the jumping off point of the starting point is a writer, theorist named Hortense Spillers, who wrote a lot about Black life and especially Black women and the sort of responsibilities that men in those matriarchal families especially have to the women in their family, women and girls especially. And this is something that I think a lot about in Sync and in the other work, but this collection basically has a lot of poems that are about that more directly. Some of them are also ekphrastic in that they are reading simultaneously other works of art that might seem more obscure. For example, things like animation and film sometimes. Not obscure to my students, but like obscure to maybe everyone else, and games. So I'll read this one and then I can read shorter ones that are also in here. And this is from, in the shower I hold myself in that same half-sober way. She does. Not for nothing when I go back and mourn the loss of certain futures together. Remainders from the tyranny of choice she teaches, not at all temperance, but some impossible form of holding under hot water. I too have been mustering great intellectual powers toward the project of sleep, or, in this odd relation to a minor figure like the mother, well, one such creature, whom I've seen on TV through a crack in the bathroom door and holding herself now, how I do too, how to tell her. The pose bears repeating, not unlike our laughing at Pookie and New Jack or the facts of sex. She says, I ain't missing out on no nut, and I understand something about our bodies. At 13, 20, 53, having as yet won nothing and refusing to lose anything. I threw away the egg foo young, hoarding horny old lady who does not understand my job requires quiet and expiration dates. For her, pride is not a character in Full Metal Alchemist, just me, a little boy who pays the rent. But Trisha Elric too was a figure for 2 boys, who, watching her, silent, domestic, decided no to her death, and so, yes, to the throbbing call of transformation in the world. I can give some context for this because I do think that it matters. So Full Metal Alchemist is the only sort of popular anime created in the early 2000s that was made by a woman. And it is ostensibly about these 2 little boys whose mother dies of an illness, and they attempt to use magic to bring her back to life. Spoiler alert, it does not work. One of them loses his soul, and the other one loses his left arm and right leg in the process. And the narrative is about how they sort of, it's also on one end about the sort of philosophy of that problem, about human life and loss, And on the other end is technically about their relationship to the state. They join the military to make enough money to try and sort of get their body parts back and to get their mother back in some way, shape, or form. And supposing what I feel is possibility, or having tried, in short, two boys lose their mother to an undisclosed illness and then their own bodies trying to get her back. And crack addiction and mental illness are not undisclosed, except when they are. You know what meaning means, like deciding what is or isn't human, or worse. But let's say I'm curious about experience and have watched many things happen beside my own brain's poorly timed betrayals. Not so much the soft comfort of frolic core, but all the way through something like innocence. What is that? I asked my mother. No clue. And off to Georgia she went for some good dick after Tuesday's meeting. A true education is without heroes, and thus we are truly rich. Such is the link between this anime and us. As the child, I longed to be taken serious and not just responsible, wanted the credibility of my pain without the knowledge of her body's work, by which I do not mean cooking, as she cannot, but aspirations to fail at what we hated, destroying the world. As for the army, she said, you know you can't just quit this like everything else. And I've had fears, say, of touching and being touched, snapping turtles, sharks, the stove, my mother in the bathroom, on the floor in pain in the shower, but never this. The maybe murder of conditional employment versus too easy, drill sergeant, too easy. The alternatives were killing in the name of presumption, or, having been outside that day, the need to protect a sister. Something I've never said. Some boy on the bus slid his gun into my mouth for not the first time, and alchemy teaches that something of equal value must be lost, and thus the father, alongside concepts vital for survival, teaches otherwise. These metaphysical problems contemplating the trouble of equity, what I wouldn't give for some transformation of her value. This is an image of the mother that they failed to bring back. Was it my fault? This classical rumination I've summoned across time, like how to better organize the plane of thought, and perhaps I could have hugged her more. Here is a formal inquiry. What is the emotional cost in truth access? Our program fundamentally concerns power, knowledge, and your mom and them. The family emerges by thick description of thought, which is lost and reconstituted every 16 frames or so. I learned to be patient with this, as if sloth was never an accidental sin, though the terms of redemption stifle anything sexy, so worth reaching for something else. In this episode, which is the first of many manic states containing a time signature, an ex-soldier escapes from prison with a tacit promise to murder King Bradley for, among other things, the Ishvalan genocide. In 2004, Hiromu Arakawa is more radical than my colleagues, and my mother, like this man, was apparently crazy. If such a thing exists beyond response to the world, and therefore justifies all kinds of property relations, for example, his and hers. Now we can be bipolar bros, my homie said, crying on my train ride home from the shrink. But for real, maybe I'm just correct, and it hurts all the time, being imagined, or found out as something real.
Thank you for that. Joseph, what are you, when you're reading your work aloud, first I want to ask, do you read it aloud as you're developing it? Do you like to hear it?
Yeah, 1,000 times.
Yeah.
I have to. I always tell my students, it's impossible to develop your voice if you don't read your work out loud.
Mm-hmm.
It's also strange that one expects other people to hear you reading and you can't stand to hear yourself reading. And I think that in order to establish the confidence you need to do it over and over again. And if you can read your own audiobooks, if they allow you, that's also a sort of really great learning experience too.
Do you, and when you're reading in public like this, because especially when you release a work, I'm sure you have to go and read it over and over again.
Yeah.
What are you looking for? Are you finding things in your own work? Are you looking to the audience? What are you looking for?
It's a little bit of both. I'm sort of sound obsessed. Music is like a big sort of guiding. It's another one of those things. I mean, like painting and animation, like filmmaking, stuff like that, that I always look at and I say, damn, if only I could make that, I probably wouldn't be writing, you know? And so I'm always constantly listening to music. And so it's funny, one of my friends, she makes a distinction. She's a poet named Joy Priest, and she makes these distinctions between how different poets sound. And she's like, this person is more like a singer or something like that. You brought up Amy Nezukumataro, right? Who is a person who I think she would think of as like, it sounds more like song. And she's like, some poets sound more like rap music, like they're spitting. And she's like, that's you when you write poems. You sound more like that. And some people sound, you know, and so I'm kind of obsessed with that. I'm also invested in what it sounds like what sounds the audience make when you're reading. And I think this is a really funny thing. It depends on the demographic of audience that you're reading to, you know? Sometimes it's like my own children in the background who won't be quiet at all is one thing. If it's people from Philly who are sort of grabbing these like really tiny and odd sort of fractured words and moments, there's a different kind of sound. Sometimes silence is a sort of great cue. Sometimes if people are talking amongst themselves, that clues you into what you need to do in certain pieces of the work. Humor is a really important one to get feedback on. So it's all of those bits, and I'm more interested in reading than looking, because I think sometimes I read people's faces wrong as well in the audience, but you know, on occasion I'm also sort of scanning, right? I'll look at people and look back down and look at people. Feedback matters.
Any of us can have resting bitch face, as they say.
Yeah, exactly, which I often do. People will say, oh my God, you were so mad. I was like, was I? I didn't feel that way, yeah.
Well, so, and how do you, I wanted to touch on humor, because there is a lot of humor in your work, but balanced with sometimes more challenging topics, and sort of, how do you juxtapose that? Is it, you know, do you go for the jarring in that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the work that moves me the most. I think it's a thing that writing can do really well, or should try to do. And it's important to sort of break ourselves out of the ordinary in that way. Saidiya Hartman uses this term, the terrible beauty of the slums, in several pieces of her writing, and I think about that a lot. Especially if you're in a room of people who have, I don't know, let's say, dealt with some really horrible shared experience or something like that. There's often a lot of laughter for people who are able to sort of talk about that stuff. Oftentimes people tell you that you're not allowed to laugh even about your own experience, which I actually find really strange and stifling. And we need to be able to sort of calibrate or figure out what that laughter does and what it's for. And I think the surprise and discomfort that you get between, okay, this is actually really funny, to like, oh, this is terrible and horrible. I mean, that's sort of the everyday, right? What does it mean to be sort of scrolling on your phones all the time? And there's like, I don't know, I watch a lot of like duck videos or whatever. And, you know, like the algorithm has really got me pegged. Like duck videos, I don't know, like those sort of vacation spoof videos and stuff like that. Juxtaposed with like really horrible and difficult shit in the news typically. And that can take 3 seconds of scanning to see both of those things. So if you want to capture what it means to be alive and as a person in the 21st century, it involves some combination of both, you know, ludicrous humor, sort of depth and tragedy, all in the same sort of couple minutes.
I'm not going to hog all the questions. We will have some time for our audience to have questions, and I think you may have one other thing you wanted to share too. But I did want to ask at least one last thing, which is about the next generation, right? We're still relatively young, but there's a next generation. You're educating them, you're offering experience. What is it that you find is kind of most challenging to impart, or, you know, what are you learning from them?
Yeah, I mean, 2 things. I think that I can use like first year students as an example maybe, because I'm teaching first year studies right now. I complained once in class. I was sort of like, you know, it's very hard to get like young people to read anything or what have you. And sort of one of my students was like, okay, well, you know, you can't act like there was nobody of your generation who didn't want to read, or there's people of it who don't read or something like that, right? So there's a way in which it becomes a kind of trite issue. And we are the ones who are in charge of making sure that we have a sort of system set up in which people can read at all. I think that they are much more sort of globally aware, politically aware, socially aware of, let's say, the everyday goings-on of people who are not themselves than I think we were. The problem with that is that they sometimes also think that they know the interiority, the motives, the sort of emotional landscape of everyone who is not them. And I am often in class, I'm saying, well, hold on, you have to have a little bit of caution about the assumptions you make about another person or the work. I think teaching sort of curiosity about people who are of different generations, race, gender, sexuality, etc., whether they are from what we would think of as a dominant class or not, is one of the things that's really important. I think the immediate access to information sometimes leads students to be like, I know who the good guys are and I know who the bad guys are, and I'm sort of like, okay, well, let's read the book first. And then we can talk about that at a closer level before we start making the jumps and assumptions.
Yeah, great points. So, well, tell us about this last piece you want to share.
Yeah, I'll read about 2 poems. They're pretty short, and they are also from the same project that is thinking about family, ostensibly called Family Matter, or the title of this poem I read before, In the Shower I Hold Myself in That Same Half-Sober Way. And I think 2 of these will come out soon from N+1, if the next issue ever comes out. I don't know what's going on with magazine stuff most of the time. And the first one is called Utah. I always wonder why the crowd runs. My homegirl be like, okay, kill me, sure, but not by accident, for some shit I actually did. At stake is something like well wishes, or weaker response to fear operations in the world. Should a killer be a type? Well, I keep the blicky locked tight for safekeep, and I only killed a hawk twice, and with a rock, for eating my friend. Beanie Siegel, Desert Eagle, the 4 to 5, blasting at the barbershop, good feeling. And Joy got that toy Taurus G2C riding passenger. Pops had a P90, believe it or not, and my little sister pulls the M&P from her purse. Big bro tosses me the green Glock 19 so he can change the baby's diaper. That's never made sense. A child asks, with his hand stuffed in a groundhog puppet, if I ever killed somebody at war. And I never caught a body, though I do be trying to watch my mouth, and it still sounds quite America, which we know runs on Dunkin'. Objectively terrible food and drink. But sometimes desire does change through rigorous schooling via the Department of Education's particular gang violence. I attended public school, which interests me, like the sound of consideration is rare, dependent upon the condition in which you live, the light by which you scrutinize the experience of your mother, whose condition you might consider following. Today, mine slept 17 hours, and she never had a gun, allegedly. I crawled over her body to wake my children for school. Public, of course, nothing hesitant sociologically, whereby the plushies and Pokemon cards appear in their book bags. Bomb threats in the principal's email, twice. Some words are incredible, and others not so much. About my fury, at least, but who's to say how many plushies might conceptually matter? And another time, this lion puppet in my child's bag, too, popped out all the way from Peru and couldn't even speak Spanish. Said something not at all about statistics, but staying in bed. He's crying, my child said, with a silly little hand. They hunt his family, and his tooth hurts. And you know what? This motherfucker went to school and acted crazy. Right off the bus that evening, he didn't even hide. He's like, I'm sorry, Dada, but can I explain myself? And he whipped out that same puppet on his silly little hand, and he put the thing to work. And this is a really short one, the last one I'll read. It's called Progress. Some children, psychologists say, have never even seen a bomb. This fact of which obscured by the throbbing temple, heat behind my head. At home, they ask why I think everything is so bad. Encouragement forms the basis of future potential. Even when there is none, granted, a water gun is a water gun is a water shortage. Today, kids, we are going to talk about superstructure and how I love you too. So bland in its invocations how violence proceeds uninterrupted by things like gentle parenting or the tyranny of the child's best interest. I offer something not at all hope in exchange for consideration, what thrives in the ubiquity of gummy candy and Negro cops. In Disney's extended universe, even Wednesday Addams, confronted with the crimes, outwits this black lady cop, so unlike Meek says, almost made me hate my people. As if unreconcilable, that ICE bonus pay, I mean $44 an hour, that's kind of a lot. So what, I got blown up by an IED for $10,000. I am permanently injured by the desire to be alive. For what is love? Babies do hurt me. On Thursdays, hopping on my back and remembering just perfect moments to say it and what cannot be refused, and the outstanding consequences of no. Oh, if super soakers could see me now, flying this toy drone through another child's skull. My son says, can't we just get the one with the camera?
Thank you for giving us a sneak look into these. I mean, your use of visual imagery, you know, I mean, it's like you can't forget the plushies combined with the state of school violence. I mean, it's like hilarious and terrifying all at once, so thank you for that. I want to give you all a chance to ask questions. Yes?
I thought it was a really interesting concept to interview those around you to write your own memoir. So what happens when it didn't jive with your own experience
Did everyone hear?
in writing?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can repeat some questions too, if folks have a hard time hearing. The question about what happens when people I interviewed to write about something, it doesn't jive with my own experience. I think that, you know, my own experience is not the most important experience in the world. In short, I think that if I'm amalgamating an experience from 15 to 20 other people who have shared a significant portion of my life and whose lives were arguably just as difficult, if not more difficult, especially when they were my age, why not believe them? I think it's an important part, you know, why not believe them? Why I think would my memory be more vital than 15 to 20 other people who, for the most part, agree about what happens, I think, you know? And I think that it's a useful exercise because I think sometimes we present ourselves as characters more valiantly than we ever were. And if you really love other people and if you have loved ones and they love you, I think part of our job is to tell each other the truth. And that can hurt a lot, but I think it's really important. And writing is one of the few places where I think we can actively do that without such intense punishment. And I think it's really rewarding still.
Thank you for that.
Right.
Yes?
I noticed when in reading Sing how economical you are with your words. Is it natural for you to be so concise because your sentences has some punch because you choose each word so carefully? Is that natural to you?
I think maybe it is. When I started writing, I started first with poetry, and it was a sort of very, my early poetry teachers, they were very economical with language, but I grew up as a kid who was very frustrated with empty language and filler words and sort of the lazy abstractions we use to try and get at something, but that no one will ever explain to you. And if you're a child, right, you ask people, you say, this is unclear, or this sounds like bullshit. You know, you can't really say that as a child because people were like, no, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. And so when I became a writer, I was like, oh no, this is my moment. This is incredibly important that I sort of get this right. And I do have a sort of burning fury to erase all words that are sort of not necessary, either for the feeling or for the complexity and understanding of the work. So I think it's like a combination of both. And I think what I read mostly is poetry. I think poetry is still the place where I get most excited too.
Thank you for that. Just as a follow-up to that, when you see a book or hear about a novel that's fantastic and you see it's 600 pages Do you automatically have that, this is going to the bottom of the list? Like, they could be more economical, like me?
No, it's kind of funny. You know, it's kind of funny. I think you can still have a novel like that where really, I mean, I'll give two examples. Okay, so two of my favorite books are N.K. Jemisin's The Fifth Season, all three of them, and Gail Jones' book Mosquito that came out in 1999. And it's the book of hers that everybody hates. And Henry Louis Gates famously has this review of that book. Nobody else reviewed it really, except for Greg Tate wrote about it, actually. You know, rest in peace, very important figure. I wish he was still around. And Henry Louis Gates was like, what is this, like her dissertation about like dialect or something like that? And I was like, this novel is incredible. But I think it really depends on the context of the situation. And a novel like that, which is about this like 6-foot-something black woman named Mosquito who's a truck driver. And it's like, the whole novel is about ruminations between her and her friends and sort of grand theoretical ideas and sort of just everyday life. And it's written sort of in dialect. It sounds like you're in a room listening to her think about and talk to a lot of her friends, right? I think that novel absolutely should be 600 some odd pages, right? And it's tied to how the novel itself moves, right? What do you do when you're driving so many long hours sort of over and over again and meeting random people in different places? How do you think about and talk about and feel about difference in a real way? And I think that novel does a great job. It's like a sort of earlier novel than I think some of the post-2020 response novels at doing a great job of thinking about the lives of a host of different people.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I'm sure he'll be leaving here in a couple weeks with like an 800-pager. Other questions? Yes?
You talked about as a medic, you could potentially save someone's life. It could be very rewarding. What makes you proud about your writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, maybe this is a small thing, but I think when I finished my first book, Sink, it was the first sort of full-length book that most of my friends had ever read in their lives. And I was really proud of that. And I thought to myself, wow, like either I'm incredibly convincing or they just really care about me in a way that is serious. Because if you're from a community that didn't grow up sort of reading for pleasure or reading as part of your station, it is sort of very hard to convince someone, look, I know you're always at work and you're like raising the kids and you're struggling in all these other ways, but like sit down quietly, right? And like use your time and patience to get through this thing, right? That's like a really difficult thing to tell somebody to do. And that happened, and it was really exciting for me. And I also think just as a moment of kind of like self-fulfillment, the fact that I can go back to even the first book and be happy about how it turned out and feel like I challenged both myself and the people around me and a sort of like wider community of folks. I think I am really, really proud about that.
Yes, right here and then here.
So you said that even while you were working on in the trauma unit, that you would like just escape in between patients and write, which I get. But how'd you put a book together? Because that's different than writing.
Yes, incredibly different than writing. And I will say it was hard to escape because I was always standing at one of the computers by the nurse's station, and I'm like highly visible or whatever, and people would sort of like point to me and be like, we have a trauma coming in, you need to be, and I'm like, okay, fine. Which is how I felt not guilty about it, because I'm like, you see me, I'm here, I'm not hiding from you, but I'm like, doing other stuff. Being nosy in people's charts that I'm not supposed to look at or whatever the case may be. For me, it didn't come until much later, and it involved primarily cutting a lot of sort of, I wouldn't say fluff, but a lot of things that were not the primary story that I was trying to tell. Sing, for example, is a story that only follows my own life from the ages of 8 to 13, in part because I was sort of frustrated by the lack of seriousness with which grown people wrote about the lives of children or their own childhoods as a sort of project in itself. And I thought, oh, there's a lot of like conversation, but this is a subject position that we all share or have shared, and we don't really seem to want to be serious about it, and I was sort of suspicious of that. But at first, I mean, this book was, speaking of 600 pages, it was like, several hundred pages longer. than that. And it went all the way into when my grandmother was murdered only several years ago, and it sort of went all the way up until that point, which is now a separate essay. And I think for me, it came out of sort of constantly rereading it and thinking about it in relation to other books in the world, and figuring out what was it that I could contribute that no one else could contribute in a sort of dialectic or back and forth conversation, and cutting essentially everything else. Anything that I thought someone else could say better than me or just as well or something like that, I kind of left alone. And I always think to myself, what is the story that only I can say or tell in a way that only I can say it? Everything else sort of goes in the, not always the trash bin, but maybe to be thought about later or to be argued with at a later date.
But I guess what I really want to know is,
Yeah.
you didn't sit there then at the computer in the trauma room putting your book together. Like, was that then something where you like went into hiding and and took like all that sort of thinking time?
Yeah, it came, the formal stuff is really difficult for me. It came later. I would do things like, I would use Scrivener and say, here are all of these sections are going to be repeating motifs. Or I would write scenes that I thought were really important because it got at, for example, how it feels to clean someone who cannot clean themselves, right? I'm talking with regards to like C. diff and urine and blood and pus, and I really wanted to sort of be explicit about that. And a lot of those scenes came from while I was working, and I would sort of tuck them away for later. But the sort of recomposition of it, didn't happen until much, much later after I left.
There was another question from the best Christmas sweater in the room.
Oh, absolutely. How are you motivating your students to feel like they have a future, considering our political climate and books being removed, and you mentioned about how do you make money, what is it looking like for the future of your profession?
Pretty bleak, I would say, but I think that that's sort of always been true. It has always been true that most writers could not, for example, make a living or influence politics directly or something like that, right? And I think that that's what a lot of people think or believe. I mean, I was talking to someone not that long ago about pay rates just in print journalism, for example, which is a place where a lot of folks used to survive. And I would ask students, well, how much do you think that this person got paid for writing this essay that we all hail as like being super important and that won a Pulitzer or something like that, and they would be like, I don't know, like 10 grand or something like that. No, probably anywhere between like $300 to like $1,000 for work that probably took a really, really long time and a lot of energy and sacrifice. And that's been either stagnant or getting lower and lower over the past like 50 years. So all that's to say, it's sort of been bleak, but one of the things that I always say is like, college students are not people who are living under the worst constraints imaginable. I teach at a private school in upstate New York, in Bronxville. I'm like, if you go here, you're already over some of the biggest hurdles of your life, right? If you're at this university. And, part of my goal is to get them to sort of see that and to take advantage of that opportunity. And to say, well, if you feel a responsibility with that sort of access and sort of freedom that you have, like, let's look at ways that you can do something with it, right? And a lot of the writers that we sort of love and honor now died destitute, and no one ever read their work until after they were gone. And so it's sort of useful to keep reminding them of that, and to tell them that there's other things in the world that they can and should participate in and live through. Do not go straight into an MFA program, after undergrad, right? That's one important thing. And that stuff is just as important as the writing.
Any last questions? If not, I'm gonna hog one. I'm mindful of time, but I do know we have at least two books on sale here. Thank you to Georgia and the team for arranging that, and I think Joseph is maybe game for signing some of those. Yeah. But beyond those two books, I'm trying to make Georgia's life difficult here. If you want folks to think of you and they got one thing else to read, and they're going to read these 2 books and they're going to read something else that's maybe not hit all the lists yet, that's not as known, not as widely published, and maybe it's not even written or published at all yet. What is that work that you kind of want people to try to define you with?
Yeah, that is an incredible question, and I hope I don't change my mind after saying this. But I wrote an essay for Harper's Magazine about a year ago. It's called Ganny, and it's about how to think about and consider seriously the women in my family, but especially my grandmother, who had been murdered sort of several years ago. And it's also thinking about the person who murdered her, who was a man about my age, who I used to play basketball with. And so that essay is super important for me as a sort of both like aesthetic statement about like how you write and how you think about writing, and also about like how you consider the, what we would call the trouble of other people.
Can we find that online, or where can we find that?
Yeah, it's online.
What should we Google?
If you just Google Ganny Harper's Magazine, it'll come up.
Okay, well, please join me in thanking Joseph Earl Thomas for sharing his time and talent with us. Really appreciate you all coming out this crazy holiday time. Everybody have happy holidays. You have surveys there in front of you. If you'll take a moment, fill those out. Our team reads every one of them. You can give them to any one of our amazing team members. We really appreciate that. And we hope we'll see you again at events in January and beyond. Thank you, Georgia Court, for sponsoring and hosting and everything.
Happy to do it.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you. Just want to let you know the books are downstairs. I would say if you don't already own one, go on downstairs and purchase them, and then we will send our beloved author down close to the register, so you don't have to come back up here after you bought the book. Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming.
One last shameless plug, and not most of you know this because you're on our email lists. All gifts between now and December 31st are matched dollar for dollar. Many of you have already given, but if you haven't and you're thinking of it, now is a great week to do so. So thank you so much for supporting the arts and new work, new voices. Thank you.